You're listening to the Fertility Docs Uncensored podcast, featuring insight on all things fertility from some of the top-rated doctors around America. Whether you're struggling to conceive or just planning for your future family, we're here to guide you every step of the way.
Hi, everyone. We're back with another episode of Fertility Docs Uncensored. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Abby Eblin from Nashville Fertility Center. And today I'm joined by my co-host and friends, Dr. Susan Hudson from Texas Fertility Center and Dr. Carrie Beanick from the Fertility Center of Las Vegas. Yay! And we should have horns and it should be like New Year's Eve. Today's the day. Our book's coming out. We're so excited. It has been so long in the coming. And so we're going to spend some time, and we're going to do this as a two-part series, actually. We're going to go through the first half of the book on this episode and talk about points that we want to make that we think you might be interested in. And then we'll do a second series, a second part on this as well. But first, we're dying to hear about Carrie and her kickball experience last night. She played adult kickball. So fill us in, Carrie. Tell us how that went.
Well, it was a birthday party for two friends, and each of them was the captain of her team, and they handed out little jerseys. And so we had, or the pennies, I think they're called. I don't know. I'm not a person.
Yeah, I think you do.
The little things that go over you that have your number. It was fantastic because they were all exactly the same size. So the women look like normal human beings. The men look like they belonged in a Vegas review show because it was so tight. And it was dusk twilight, so that it was, pleasant temperature, but still wasn't super bright.
Did you all have to line up and gradually get picked like you did in elementary school?
No, and I was really worried that was going to happen.
I never got picked when I was a kid.
Me neither.
Yeah, I was mentally prepared to be the last one picked, although I was playing with a bunch of other physicians, and so all of us were mentally prepared to be the last one picked. So fortunately, they handed it out because each person had a bunch of people she had invited. And so it just kind of naturally divided along those lines, which was good. Yeah.
So was this a center that did this, or was this just your friends came up with it on their own? And how did everybody know the rules? Because, I played kickball when I was in about the fourth grade, but I don't really remember the rules.
You just kick the ball and you have to run to the bases? That's all I remember.
Yeah,
okay.
The organizer's dad was the referee. And so this sweet little, 60, 70 some odd year old man was the one who got the bases. He made sure we had the ball. And it was the old school red
big
rubber
red
ball.
Uh-huh. Cool.
And
that can hurt if people really kick it hard. It hits you or something. It hurts.
My big play of the night was that I caught one.
Oh, nice.
And we're going to use the term caught very loosely here because I caught it for 0.2 seconds before it bounced right out of my arms again.
So did it count? Was it an out then?
No. I bumbled it. It was an unforced error. And so that was my big moment of the night. But I also kicked and got to second base. But apparently I illegally got to second base with whatever the rules of kickball were because the ref came over and he said, okay, well, make sure that when it goes up in the air in a pop fly like that you don't start running until you know that.
Because that shit, then they can throw you out. So they can make a double play on you.
Exactly. And I realized I am a doctor for a reason. Wow.
Did Mark play?
No, he stayed home. He was not feeling super great.
Too bad. I want to know if he was better than you.
Probably. He did a lot of baseball, so at the very least.
At least know the rules, yeah.
Yeah. I've got longer legs, so I can move a little faster sometimes. But even then, that doesn't totally count because he's the better runner than I am anyway.
Pickleball's big now around here, but, I think maybe you're onto something new. Maybe kickball's going to be the next big trend for adults.
Yeah, after the game, when I made that dive for that ball, I landed hard and I didn't land weird. I just landed hard. And so last night after I got home, I stretched really well and used my little massage gun thing. And then this morning I got up and I went, God damn, I am old.
There's a reason you don't play kickball all the time is what you're saying.
100%. There's a reason that I like martial arts. There's a reason I like running. There's a reason I like being a bump on a log. Like those, I'm better at those. I'm much better.
I was never good at sports where there were flying balls because inevitably they were going for my head and I just didn't like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I instantly placed myself in the far outfield.
Yeah, I was always the right fielder in softball too. I was like, don't come to me.
At one point, like I said, it was dusk, and so at one point, I see this little thing floating above me, and I get it flapping around, and
The
it was a
bat?
bat. I watched this bat, and I was just kind of twirling around, watching him flit around, and I'm like, "Yes, I am totally the kid in the outfield
Yeah.
picking
Just
daisies."
like sitting there, like playing in the dirt in the
Uh-huh.
outfield.
Yeah, I have no remorse. No remorse whatsoever.
Well, I'm glad you're intact. No bones broken. No ER visits or anything after that.
Amen. We all made it through. Although one guy, the very first kick he took, he pulled a muscle. Yeah.
Hope you didn't tear anything.
Nah, he's fine.
Here at Fertility Docs Uncensored, we've spent years answering your toughest fertility questions and walking alongside you on the IVF journey. And now we've taken everything we've learned from helping thousands of patients and from the thoughtful questions you've sent in for us to answer and put it all in one resource, our brand new book, The IVF Blueprint. This book is your step-by-step guide through the entire IVF process, written in the same conversational, down-to-earth style you've come to know from us. Whether you're just starting to explore IVF or you're already in the middle of treatment, the IVF Blueprint is designed to give you the clarity, confidence, and support you need. You can find the IVF Blueprint in print, as an ebook, and as an audiobook with a special conversation from us at the end, wherever books are sold. Links to purchase are also available on our website at fertilitydocsuncensored.com. So if you've been wanting an easy-to-understand, compassionate guide to IVF, pick up the IVF Blueprint today, and let's take this journey together.
So we are going to turn and talk about a subject that Carrie and Susan and I have been talking about a lot for the last and a half or so. And we're just so excited that it's finally coming out. So we're just going to start and go chapter by chapter and talk about things that we think are important points to make in each chapter, things that you really want to focus on. So Chapter 1, what you need to know about IVF before you start.
I think the important thing about chapter 1 is that understanding that even though you've gone to see your doctor and they've talked to you, or you've been on Dr. Google, which always Carrie says went to a very questionable medical school, that there's so much to the IVF process and there's so much noise out there, and some of that noise is good, some of that noise isn't so good, that really this book was set out to help you go through your personal journey and really for you to carry along with you and be jumping around from chapter to chapter. What do I need here? What do I need there? Or to use the book for other uses, like if you have a friend or family member who wants to know what you're going through and you're just like, ugh, I just do not have the emotional capital to be able to explain it to you. Here you go. And so I think that's one of the most important things about chapter 1.
I think the first section in general, because the book is divided into four parts. The first section is the getting ready section. And this part, even though the book is called the IVF Blueprint, it applies to anybody who's going through this fertility process where you're at a point where, okay, I probably need some additional help. This applies to all of the things that anybody really should know as they're going through the early parts of fertility care. And so this first part in the getting ready is just thinking about all of the basics.
And when Carrie talks about the first part, in case you don't have the book already, this first section is the first 100 or so pages of a 300-ish page book. So there's a lot of information. So even if you aren't going through an IVF journey right now and you're just doing a fertility journey, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
So first part also has some little snippets of just things like if you're just perusing the book and you're like, I don't know if I really want this or not. There's a list of different things that we talk about, snippets of things that are all throughout the book, but we put it in that first chapter just so you can see if this is something that you would really like. I think chapter 2 really gets into the meat of the book, and really we put it there because a lot of people when they come to see us, they're like, should I do IVF? I just don't know if this is right for me. And there's really not one thing that you can say, oh, if this, then yeah, you definitely need to do IVF, or this is definitely right for you emotionally or physically. Chapter 2 goes through several questions, key questions that you may need to ask yourself before you decide if IVF is right for you. It goes through specifically about 11 questions. And so I think it may be really helpful to help you decide if IVF is the right thing or not.
In chapter 2, is that also where we discuss the evaluation leading up into your fertility journey?
Well, it stops with the doctor asking the doctor questions, I think is where it stops.
I think it's actually chapter 4, getting ready for IVF, where we go through a lot of the testing that we do. And before then is chapter 3, which is Will the Meds Make Me Crazy? And that one, we spent so much time going through all of the different medications, what they are, how they work. Because a lot of people come to us and like, oh my God, I don't want to take hormones. And they don't necessarily realize that what we give, yes, they're hormones, but a lot of them aren't the hormones that you're thinking of. And so being able to really delineate that and talk about it and say, these are the types of meds, these are the different classes, these are how they are used, this is the set that's interchangeable, this is not. That's really what we are going through. And we include the side effects and we include the most common uses of each one. And we include the less common or more diverse uses, because a lot of the meds we give, depending on how you give them and when you give them, they have a different effect. And the beauty of what we do is that those are the puzzles that we love to work out and figure out, okay, I have this, how can I best use it to serve this woman with this physiology here in front of me now?
One of the things too that we really tried to put in the book is we tried to put little snippets, like you can read the majority of the book, but there's side notes that we'll have about certain things that you may be interested in this second chapter. One of the things, and we have some side notes about this too, but one of the things that I think may be really helpful if you're thinking about doing IVF is we have a whole section on what will happen during the IVF consult. We talk about what the realistic time frame is. We talk about how often you'll have to come to the office. We give a description of the egg retrieval. We go through a lot of details in that first chapter. And it also, there's some areas that tells you, the questions that you may want to ask that maybe you wouldn't have thought of on your own that may be helpful. Moving right along, we talk about the stimulation medicines as Carrie talked about. And then we talk about, what you need to do in preparation for IVF, because I think a lot of people don't realize that you really do need to prepare for that, when you're about to start IVF.
And when we're talking about preparation, we're not just talking about what you do when you go to the fertility doctor. This is really talking about your entire body and mind getting in the right space to both prepare yourself for fertility treatment as well as pregnancy. And so a lot of times people don't realize that, hey, I need to have my blood sugars under control. I need to have my high blood pressure under control. I was born with a heart defect and I haven't seen a cardiologist since
That's a
I was
big
a
one. Yeah.
teenager. All those things need to be I's dotted, T's crossed, because ideally, by the time you're going through this, we don't want to have to put on the brakes and be like, no, your blood sugar, your hemoglobin A1C is 8. That's not safe for you and baby. We would like to have some of these things at least being worked on while we're doing the evaluation. So ideally, if you end up having to go through IVF, we can go full throttle.
And
This
even
is
just,
just homework that
yeah.
have people do. It's definitely all the homework we have people do, because by the time you get into the IVF cycle, fertility centers are pretty well self-contained. And this is true of a lot of obstetrics in general. Nobody else wants to be dealing with pregnant women and babies because it's two patients at the same time. Fertility docs do not like anyone else messing with our patients. But this is the stuff that's got to be straightened out and ready to go before we are able to really start and take over. Because once we take over, we very much want to control everything and we want it to be laid out cleanly beforehand.
And so, really, any medical condition, rheumatoid arthritis, liver disease, kidney disease, Susan did an excellent job at writing that chapter. And she went through every organ system you can imagine, because people a lot of times just don't think, well, even though I've had kidney stones, do I need to really worry about that when I'm about to get pregnant? Well, you probably need to be checked out and make sure you're not about to have another kidney stone or have some problem. And so I think it's really beneficial to think about those things ahead of time. And even simple things like, have you had a pap smear done in the last few years? Have you had a pelvic exam? If you're over 40, have you had a mammogram? Those are all things that we're going to want you to have had before we get you pregnant. We want to do these things before you get pregnant, not after you get pregnant. And so we then go on in the book and talk about lifestyle changes. So we talk about medical conditions and then we talk about lifestyle changes. So what are some lifestyle changes that we always talk to patients about before IVF?
No nicotine. None. It doesn't matter how you get it, whether it's gum or vaping or patches, nicotine is nicotine, and it's bad for eggs and it's bad for sperm.
When you think about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll theme, we're good with sex, much as you want, go for it. I mean, we will tell you when not to
With the
have.
drugs and rock and roll.
And I don't care about the rock and roll as long as you're not in a mosh pit jumping up and down in the midst of a retrieval, but you can do that in advance as much as you What we care about are the drugs, and those are the legal and illegal kinds. And so the illegal ones, it goes without saying, none of them are beneficial. We don't know if any amount is safe. Even marijuana can have a negative impact. And so, yes, we all pitch a high holy fit about nicotine in any of its forms, but alcohol, other drugs, those all have an impact too, as do the other meds that you can take that don't require a prescription, ibuprofen, Tylenol, your sleep aids, those types of things. We want to know about all of them. We want to make sure that you are in the best place possible so that you're not on something going in that you think is totally innocuous, even if it's just like a supplement that's going to have a negative impact.
One of the other ones is weight. Some centers actually have a requirement that you have to be below a certain body mass index, a certain weight for your height in order to do the egg retrieval. And that's not punitive. It's just that, we're going to put a really long needle in your body to get to your eggs. And there's lots of other important organs there that we don't want to injure. And so the heavier a patient is, the harder it is to see your bowels, your bladder, your blood vessels. And so it makes it much safer if you're closer to a normal body weight. And so we also talk about that in that chapter about the requirements for that. And Susan has a good section on GLP-1 inhibitors. So you may want to mention those as well, because we have lots of patients on those.
Yes, so we do talk about GLP-1s. What are the benefits for them? When should you potentially stop them? Because at this point, we don't think they're great during the immediate baby making time.
Exactly.
Starting a family is one of life's greatest adventures, but sometimes the path to parenthood isn't as straightforward as expected. Shady Grove Fertility is there to guide hopeful parents every step of the way, offering compassionate care and advanced fertility treatments to help make parenthood possible. With their exclusive 100% refund program for IVF and flexible monthly payment options, Shady Grove Fertility makes treatment more accessible. Visit shadygrovefertility.com to schedule a consultation and take the first step, because the adventure of a lifetime starts with Shady Grove Fertility.
So then our next chapter talks about supplements, and we get lots and lots and lots of questions about supplements. So we broke this chapter down because it was so complex for the three of us. And we had to go back to school, back to the library, and do lots of research to figure out what the latest with a lot of supplements that patients are interested in. So Carrie, what did you glean from this chapter when you were doing your supplement part?
So my term papers, because that's really what these were, and don't worry, we distilled it down. We made it so that our superpower, which is taking really technical information and turning it into something that's digestible for any normal human being, we turned it into a much easier to read section. But I did the myo-inositol section and the DHEA section. And so myo-inositol, I think, is really the big takeaway here, that it can be very beneficial, especially for patients with PCOS. We think that it's unlikely to cause any negative impact, but that's something that especially our PCOS patients can be really beneficial and fairly easy to take without much in the way of side effects. So that was my little corner of this chapter.
My corner that I think I dove in and learned more about was folic acid, folate, all of the variations of those things, and all of the very complicated names that go along with folate metabolism. And so if you ever really wanted to know truly what are the differences in these, what are the food sources of these things, when do you actually need to take more or less than the average person, this is the place to look.
And then there's also a part at the very end that talks about your male partner and how supplements could impact him as well. And so, and that's something we don't talk a lot about when we're in the visit. We primarily are focused on the female patients. So you may be interested in looking at that part as well. And then we start to move on and get into closer to the egg retrieval. We talk about what to expect and what are some of the things that patients need to expect, Susan, when they're getting ready to do IVF, when they're preparing for it.
Right. So one thing that they need to be prepared for is that they're going to have to take injections, and those are going to be on a daily basis for usually a period of 10 to 12 days. But there's a lot of different ways for us to do that. And you'll also have to have a number of visits at your doctor's office during that week and a half time period. And during this chapter, we really talk about what to expect in those office visits? What are we looking for? Why are we looking at follicles? What are follicles? Why are they growing? How does all of those things relate to each other?
Looking at the course of time that this all happens in and just what to expect from some of those office visits and who you will and maybe won't see during them. IVF is a team sport, and being able to go in and talk to not just your doc, but the ultrasonographers and the front desk people and the nurses and the MAs and everybody, knowing some of the expectations of this process, because yes, your doc is driving the boat, but there's an awful lot of people who help us get through as well, which is particularly important when you look at our next chapter, which is the insider's view of the egg retrieval that Abby did a really fabulous job in providing the original outline for, because it goes through every part of that retrieval from top to bottom.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to know about this chapter too is that the flow for every office is different. I think it's really good that we mentioned that your doctor may have you come in early for an estrogen level and then come back to the office or come to an office later on for ultrasound. You may have to go to different places for those sorts of things. We try and prepare you for that, but the workflow of every office is different. And so throughout the book, if there's anything that your doctor's office does differently and you don't understand why we said it one way in the book and they did it differently, just know that there's lots and lots of different ways to do things. The way we put it in the book is not the perfect right way to do it. It's what we're used to, but there's different ways to do different things and accomplish the same goal at the end. In preparation for that, the next chapter is about the egg retrieval. And so we try to go through all the details of who you're going to see and what happens with the egg retrieval. Anybody want to give us a little scoop about that?
To give a little shout out to Abby because Abby was our illustrator in the book. And one of the best pictures of being able to see what exactly is happening in an egg retrieval is on page 132. And she just did a really great job of visually conceptualizing what we see in our brain, but you're asleep. And so you don't really understand what's going to happen, but really to be able to get an idea of how that egg retrieval is going to happen while you're under anesthesia.
Thanks, Susan. But I think also too, just knowing all the people that are going to be there is really helpful too, because you're nervous. You don't know what to expect. You think a lot of people um, want to be in control. Like we all want to be in control, and the thought of going to sleep and somebody putting this large needle in your body and you don't understand how it's done. It's just really scary. And I think the more information that you can get about it, the better. So kind of the first people that you see when you walk in are generally nurses in the pre-op area. They have you sign consents. You may have done that ahead of time, but that's some of the things that they'll do. They'll get your IV started, and then you'll go back for the actual procedure after that. The procedures may be 30 minutes or so, and then you go back to the recovery area. And the chapter goes through all the things that you will encounter, all the people that you'll encounter as you go through that process.
We also talk about the immediate time after the egg retrieval, so the afternoon afterwards and the next few days thereafter, to understand what's normal, what are things that we're worried about, and what are things that you should be keeping an eye on.
And then the big thing after that, hopefully, is the embryo transfer. And so Carrie did a really good job talking about why you might want to choose a fresh transfer versus a frozen transfer. And what are some nuggets from that, Carrie?
So a lot of people come in having really strong opinions about a fresh versus transfer, and a lot of those stem from my mother's sister's aunt's grandmother's daughter did IVF in this year, and this is what she did, and it worked. And a lot of what people know is based on historical data, which is great, but not necessarily representative of what happens today. And so the next segment really looks at where did fresh transfers come from? Why did we used to do those? How did frozen transfers arise? What's the difference between a frozen transfer 15 years ago versus maybe today? And what are the pros and cons of each? So, for example, anybody who wants PGT, pre-implantation genetic testing, that's a frozen transfer because that doesn't happen fast enough to be able to do a fresh. The reasons that you wouldn't do a fresh include some of the endometrial preparation points. What are your progesterone levels? What's your risk of hyperstimulation syndrome? How can we minimize all of the problematic effects that we do have control over? Because there's so little that we control in life in general that you want to seize the opportunities to get the best you can.
So chapter 10, I think, has a great title, IVF. It's a numbers game. And that's really important to talk about because expectations for everybody, it's important to set those ahead of time. Susan, tell me what readers are going to learn from chapter 10.
Well, what readers are going to learn from chapter 10 is really how to set expectations for what's going to happen the week after retrieval. Once we know how many eggs you have, what happens on day one, what happens between day one and day 5, 6, and 7, when ideally you're going to have embryos that get to an advanced stage embryo. The most important thing to understand in this process is we have what's called attrition. So you're going to start off with a certain number. And as we go over those days, those numbers are going to get smaller and smaller. That is very normal. It is what is to be expected. We try to give you some of the information of why is this happening and what are the benefits of being able to make it to that advanced stage embryo. We also have a good little section in that chapter all about sperm
I was just going to
because
say that. Yeah, that's a great section. It's actually several pages.
it is. It's a great section and talking about needing millions of something to do one job. I mean, those little guys don't stop and ask for directions. So we
Yeah.
try to explain a little bit of the method behind the madness there as well.
And also in that chapter too, we talk about embryo biopsy. Want to say a little bit about that, Carrie?
So, embryo biopsy is not just about sticking the needle in, taking a couple cells out, and sending it off. It's about which embryos should get biopsied because you can have the external structure of an embryo, but if you don't have the internal structure, you don't have what you need. And so, embryo biopsy is putting a discerning eye on those embryos and saying, okay, this not only has the external structure, but it has the internal parts like the inner cell mass that becomes the baby and the trophectoderm, which is what becomes the placenta, because you want all of those parts down the line in order to make that biopsy information valuable. Because it doesn't matter if you've got, perfect biopsy results for an embryo that just flat out doesn't have the inner cell mass and so doesn't contain what it needs to get to your end goal, which is being awake all night with a little baby.
And that leads into the next chapter in the final part of section 2 of the book. It talks about a lot of genetic terms. And when patients come in to see us, we have to cover everything in 30 minutes, including all this genetic information. And we throw out terms like chromosome, aneuploidy, gene, balanced translocation, unbalanced translocation. All those terms are talked about in the book. There's a definition of each one of them. And we go through what's the normal process in terms of reproduction if you didn't have to use IVF, what happens to women's eggs as they age and why that's a factor in doing IVF maybe sooner rather than later. We close in talking about the different types of genetic testing. You guys mentioned that earlier, but anybody want to mention sort of the different types of genetic testing that can be done on an embryo?
So we have pre-implantation genetic testing or PGT. And then after that, we have all kinds of initials. So I'll start off with A, aneuploidy. Aneuploidy is looking to see if we have the right number of chromosomes.
There's
And go ahead.
PGTSR, which is making sure that those chromosomes are structurally arranged. So SR is structural rearrangement, that they're arranged appropriately. So this applies to people who have the normal number of chromosomes, but they're stuck together in a funny way.
We
We
also
all
have
Go
PGT,
ahead.
PGTM stands for single gene traits. So cystic fibrosis would be an example of that. With those traits, it's a problem if both partners have that same abnormal gene. The child has about a 25% chance of inheriting that gene and actually having that condition. And so by doing PGTM, it's a way of not having a child that has that condition, basically.
And then we also have PGTP. P stands for polygenetic, and that's the new kid on the block. That's where we're looking at multiple genes, which may have an impact on risks of getting medical conditions like type 1 diabetes, schizophrenia, heart disease, melanoma, all kinds of things.
So that wraps up the first half of the book. And just we've given you just little tidbits because there's a lot of information. Our book, we feel like, is packed full of information. And even after we wrote the book, our editor came back and said, aren't there more things you can add? So we racked our brains to think of things that maybe we didn't add the first time around. So hopefully you'll find this really helpful and you'll find some information that you can use and utilize and will help you in your IVF journey. Any last thoughts that you ladies have?
Part of the reasons we wrote the book include that no matter how good your doctor is and your office is, they just flat out cannot get all this information to you in the limited amount of time that we have. And so what this book is very helpful for is not only filling in the gaps, but helping you know what's going to be said so that when you're applying it to your specific case, you can ask good questions and you can be informed and you feel less overwhelmed. And so you're able to absorb more with your doctor for your personalized care. And so grab a copy, shove it in your purse, and bring it with you to your appointment so that you've got some little light reading to do while you are waiting for your ultrasound and whatnot so that you
No
can...
more Dr. Google. Dr. Google's gone now.
And Dr. TikTok.
And Dr. TikTok.
Yes.
All right. Well, to our audience, thanks for listening, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts to have next Tuesday's episode pop up automatically for you. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube. That really helps us spread reliable information to help as many people as possible.
Visit fertilitydocsuncensored.com to submit questions and sign up for our email list. Pick up your copy of the IVF Blueprint today. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, any of your favorite book-selling locations. And check out our Instagram and TikTok for quick hits of fertility tips between episodes.
As always, this podcast is intended for entertainment and is not a substitute for medical advice from your own physician. Subscribe, sign up for emails, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.